Hi, I'm Steven, and this is my 1998 Buell S1 Lightning, White Lightning as they like to call it. And the White Lightning is designated by the type of heads on this engine, and it was made in 1998 only. From 96 to 97 it came with Lightning heads, which were far inferior to these. The Thunderstorm heads bumped this bike up to about 101 horsepower at the motor. It makes about 87, 88 at the wheel. Not terribly fast, not terribly sporty, but it's rare and unique. Buell's got an interesting history behind it. They were founded in 1983. Eric Buell was an engineer for Harley and separated from Harley, decided to make his own bikes, and race bikes actually. He started off making things like his Battle Twin and things like that. Pretty serious race bikes back in the day. By today's standards, they're actually extremely slow, but this is 2015. So these bikes came out in 1993. Harley-Davidson injected about 49% stake in Buell in 1993, and then they started coming out with these bikes that Buell called the tube frame models. And they're called tube frames because they have tubular steel welded frames. The gas tank is traditionally up on top like most bikes are, except that it's plastic. Since it's plastic, you can't stick anything to this bike without it looking crazy and all bubbly. In 2003, Buell was owned wholly by Harley-Davidson, and they came out with their fuel and frame models, which are your typical Buells that people see today. They're the big wide frames or whatever. They use the frame as a gas tank and the swing arm as an oil tank. Pretty innovative technology. They also have a zero torsion load, or ZTL, front brake. It's one big perimeter brake rotor on the front. Nice technology. This one uses one brake rotor on the front, but that's just because they were trying to save weight. In 2009, Buell, as Harley had owned them, was discontinued, and Eric Buell actually branched off into his own brand, Eric Buell Racing, and right now they're having some financial issues, but they still make motorcycles, and that dude's got a dream, and this was one of them. This bike right here was his favorite to build. He said, "I like them." It's the tube frame models are very unique, very hard to come by. Parts are for the body are very hard to find. For the motor, I could probably walk over there and kick over a rock and find a Sportster engine motor, because it is just a Sportster Evolution twin. It's just your standard 1203 Sportster motor. As far as aftermarket mods on this bike, the only thing aftermarket is the carbon fiber rear wheel hugger, the license plate mount, because that was taken off with the original, and it's got a Crane single fire ignition and an aftermarket hand can exhaust or intake, and it's got a Vance & Hines exhaust. And everything else is original. I actually rebuilt this motor's top end about 2.5 weeks after I got it, because it had been sitting up for several years, and it had just basically just ruined from sitting. It's air cooled, so riding around in city heat and stuff like that, it feels like you're riding on an oven. It will bake your right leg, or as I call it, it's the thigh fryer. As far as maintenance and repairs on these motorcycles, Harley-Davidson was designed for monkeys to work on. I don't care what anybody says. They are extremely simple operating. This is 1940s technology. It's push rod, air cooled, V-twin. I had to rebuild this one, and the things I found goofy on it, since it is such an old design and uses such old technology, like torque specs. Most people think of torque specs when you tighten a bolt, you torque it down to a certain torque spec and you leave it. Well, on this one, The head bolts, when I was putting on the cylinder heads and stuff, I torqued them down to 2 different torque values, and then each bolt had to be turned 90 degrees from where it sat. That was the final torque. These are the kind of torque specs you run into with these very old Harley-Davidson engines, and just very old technology like this. I mean, there's nothing precise about them. They're extremely loose tolerances. They're basically slapped together by monkeys. I mean, and they work. So they don't make enough power to really hurt themselves, so they last a really long time. And if anything ever happens to the motor, I can always find another motor.
What kind of bike do you have?
A Buell.
A Buell!